Well, I mean, for all the pages for the book to be like, hey, we've got a split in the middle, come check it out. It's a picture of Barling at Night of Science Fiction, Fantasy and Horror After Party at IATSE Stage 80 on September the 6th, 2014 in California. And that's the picture. This is 1000 Women in Horror, a collection of mini biographies by Alexandra Helen Nicholas, a Australian author. I've met her, so I started buying some of her books. Turns out I've got a lot of her audio commentaries as well, on a bunch of movies that I have, so it's pretty swell. It makes me a bit fluffed to meet someone who I've got a collection of their works in a way. I don't know, it's a weirdly specific thing, I feel like. It's my own kind of meeting an artist, but they're a film historian, so it's like a really unique crowd. But hey, look, it's really fun meeting these people and having conversations with them because they're human beings. But I bought this recently and a few other of her books. I've got one about Suspiria coming in, which I think is like a collection of essays. It's a part of a series that a bunch of people have done, so they've all got like the same cover with a picture of maybe something from the film throughout it, like something, one on, I think, Halloween, The Thing, and a bunch of other movies, so, yeah. But I bought this one, it came in the other day, it's about 600 odd pages, almost exactly 600, it's actually 590 pages, but of course, you got your front cover, I got the paperback, so of course expect some fingerprints on it. This is Cataloguing Women in Horror from 1895 to 2018, and of all things, it's just like profiles on actors and producers and writers and directors, and there might even be musicians and stuff, but there's small essays as well. There's even, this one's even got an interview. Wow, that's pretty cool, actually. So it's got some interviews, it's got like exclusive stuff, talking to different people. I haven't looked too much into this, I only just got it the other day and I've been busy. I mean, hell, it's even got pride to bloody Jamie Lee Curtis at the start, which is always great. This book is a result of the kindness of Lee Gambon, whose support of his friends and colleagues is equal only to his own astonishing output as a film critic, author, and programmer. Many of the women I interviewed for the book I met through Lee, and his enthusiasm is matched only by his unrelenting encouragement. Yeah, then it continues with more special thanks, because of course this is the acknowledgement section. It's really interesting, because it's not what I expected the book to be. Like, I don't know, I was expecting something like that was a bunch of, like, essays on different, like, women, or, like, women in the horror industry or whatever, but instead it's just cataloguing them all. So, like, if I went to, let's go to L for Lancaster, because of course, you know, can't not love. So, like, for example, you've got Lanchester, Elsa, at the base there, but then also extending over to the next page where you've got some extra details about her and her works. In this case, mentioning as one of the most famous images of women in horror, to the point of putting on the front cover, and privileged on the front cover of this book. My God, the book is beating me to a time punches. As the title character of James Whale's 1935 horror film Bride of Frankenstein, Elsa Lanchester is one of the most iconic women in the film genre's entire history. Yet she was a performer with a vast range, playing in everything from historical epics to comedies to family films. And then you've got like a mini biography, whilst also going into the other films that she has starred in. And a lot of them can just be as simple as that. Like, it'll tell you, like, oh, this is a person, usually not with images, but sometimes with images, sometimes with interviews, if, of course, Alexandra was lucky enough to interview them. And it delves into just probably what you'd establish to be like, oh, it's basically a Wikipedia of all these people. Well, yeah, exactly. It's an encyclopedia of all these women who have been in film, which is something that I find to be utterly respectful, obviously, of women, but of horror as well. Like, because you could always just be like, oh, let's make a book about all the, like, famous women in films, and films. And of course, there's a lot of actresses, all right? But to limit it to be like, oh, we're going to talk about horror and like how they've at least made some kind of a staple in horror film history, but they've also been in other stuff. It's not just horror was their identity. Maybe horror was what their identity has stemmed from. Maybe it's what made them really big, but they've also been able to, be successful in other industries, much like, say, Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, most people know who Jamie Lee Curtis is. Sure, of course, born into two famous parents, but at the same time, making an identity for herself is also quite amazing, to the point of there are a lot of people in my generation who obviously know about her, but don't know that she's like Janet Leigh's daughter from Psycho, and there's like shit like that that's just like, wow, that's really cool. So I think that that's a really prized thing to have, and it's a cute thing to have on the shelf. I don't really know how much of it I'm going to dive into. There might be the occasion where someone might be like, oh, like maybe I might be looking at the film on my laptop and it says, oh, it has this person who was in this film. And I might be like, oh, cool, I'm going to look at my horror book and see what the horror book has to say about this person. So, yeah, I just figure that's just really cool. What else do we have? So, in reference to Lee Gambon, who some people might know I'm doing an interview with, I actually bought this book of his, Hell Have No Theory Like Her, The Making of Christine. I'm actually not too decently far into it, because I'm a very slow reader and I don't have a lot of time to read. I like to watch movies. This book, which is really interesting to the point of, hey, look, it's even signed by him. I got him to sign it when he was drunk. It's great. Because Lee's great. Great dude. This is one of those classic books where they will cover the making of a film, which will sound like, oh, well, I can watch a documentary, but this is like individualized interviews that goes into each different scene, basically. He literally covers every single scene, from interpretations to what the cast thought of these certain scenes, what they would have done with this and that, the special effects, the John Carpenter talking about all this kind of stuff. Now, Lee's the kind of guy who he knows how to like kind of keep rambling on about stuff, which may sound really obnoxious in a way, but again, listen to his audio commentaries, you get kind of the same aesthetic of like, he just knows so much shit, and it's because he has so much of a passion for it that he will ramble and ramble and ramble. But in this case, he could be talking about John Carpenter and be like, well, John Carpenter did this, this, and this, and then it's tied all the way back to Christine of like how, if not for this certain event, then he wouldn't have been able to do this and that, and it's just really interesting to read through it. I like, too, how like he starts most chapters with like interpretations of certain elements, like talking about how like, oh, the music in this signifies this and this and this. It's not always just interpretations. Maybe it's just a blatant like, this is what the meaning of this part of the film is, what this is actually identifying through the music, through the visuals, through the... Obviously, he will praise John Carpenter and the creative team behind the films, like the excellent like camera work of like the crane shot panning around this and how it maneuvers this way and all this kind of stuff, whilst also feeding you behind the scenes stuff, talking about how, oh, the factory that the start of the film is set in was like this. They had to get all these different cars from around the country and all this kind of stuff, and it's really interesting stuff to read. I definitely obviously recommend watching the film first because, but then even a lot of people would say, read the book first. You can do that too. My mate Guy, who suggested I read the book before I watched the film, which I didn't do. The book obviously is a big expansion on what the film is, so you get a lot more into it, so then you can watch the film and be more understanding of it, which happens with a lot of films that are adapted from books, where there's a lot more expansion in the book that you can still apply to the text of the film. But, yeah. It's very fun. He goes through different interview parts as well. He has a bunch of different images from the film, all in black and white, because, it's cheaper to print it that way. But yeah, I definitely recommend buying this book and giving it a read if you're a fan of Stephen King or John Carpenter or even Lee Gambon. Check out his other books too. It's the only book of his that I've gotten, mostly because I went looking for a bunch of his books and I was like, I want to get the Christine one because it's, of all the films, like he's written about films, he's written about TV shows, and he has a lot of knowledge on classic, like, 60s to 80s TV shows. Fuck, even shit from before that. Like, he knows a lot of stuff when it comes to that. That's like his forte, almost, which is weird to say because he knows a lot of stuff. it's just one of those things where it's like, it was the book that like stood out to me. And like, I love Christine, I love John Carpenter. I feel like a behind the scenes could be really interesting for this, because I have of course the audio, the 4K of Christine, which is the 35th anniversary edition, and it does come with a commentary by director John Carpenter and Keith Gordon, the lead actor, and it comes with some extra special features. But I don't know as to how much it probably talks about the actual making of the film. Probably, obviously, the audio commentary would, but there are interviews of John Carpenter, interviews with the writer. I think there are interviews of Stephen King. Not too many that I recall, but yeah, it's good stuff. Now, given it's the only one I've like read to a decent extent, I will note that there is the thing where he will state obviously who each person is whilst the book goes along, but after a while it'll just be names rather than name and title. So you might not know that. Oh, you might not remember this guy was actually the producer, and this guy is actually one of the actors from this scene or whatever. But he also ends each chapter, because he starts at basically describing how the scene goes throughout and emphasizing on interpretations, what the meaning of this is, and all that kind of stuff, what the intent behind this was, going into interviews, and it ends with an interview about the music, which is really interesting. It's my only kind of minor criticism of the book, of like, you realize in like the first and so chapter that, you know, it's a thing. Like, he will like, oh, this is what the guy talks about the music, you know, is about. But it just feels a little bizarre, because sometimes it feels like you're jumping backwards in the film from the point that you're at. So it's like a little bit weird, but it's just because that's the best way to talk about the music in it. I feel like some kind of rearranging of how that could have been done maybe could have been done better, but it's on the odd occasion, at least so far, that I found. It's not at every end of the chapter you're like, why the hell are we like looking at scenes from earlier ago talking about the music when we need to be talking about, we've already progressed past this, you know, it's the end of the chapter. But still, he also ends a chapter with images from the film, so that's quite nice. Next up, we have another Alexandra Helen Nicholas. We have the Giallo Canvas. This is about, well, art, excess, and horror cinema. So this one is a lot shorter of a book. It's 240 odd pages. It's proper essays and details talking about, obviously, horror cinema, in particular talking about Dario Argento. That's actually what this is. Better the Crystal Plumage. Talking about Giallo cinema. This is interesting. I haven't yet delved into these. Now, unfortunately, I know, it probably seems weird. Julian, why the hell are you talking about these if you haven't delved into them yet? I don't know, because I figured it would make for a fun video. Sue me. Please don't. I can't afford it. This is one of those ordeals where it's like, having now met her, knowing that she's written these books about Suspiria, about horror cinema, about Giallo in particular, is really cool. You know, I don't know anyone who's written shit about Giallo, you know? Hell, I hardly know anyone who's watched Giallo. It's like, maybe I've seen Edgar Wright tweet about it, but like, I don't know anyone personally who, you know, none of my friends really watched Giallo. But yeah, this goes into a bunch of different films. You've got The Forbidden Room, you've got The Psychic. She actually references the Italian name as well. So you got some Fulci films. Obviously, Dario Argento. I say obviously, but it's like, you wouldn't... It's like, you know, it's on the bloody cover. Start with famous paintings. Clues, presents, and painting. Oh, because it's canvas. I get it now. Because Giallo's an art. It is. Then you go into different painters. That's really weirdly specified. I'll have to definitely read into this more. So, for the back description, it actually says, beloved among cult horror devotees for its signature excesses of sex and violence, Italian Giallo cinema is marked by switchblades, mysterious killers, whiskey bottles, and poetic overinflated titles. What, you tell me Better the Crystal Plumage is overinflated? What are you talking about? A growing field of English-language Giallo studies has focused on aspects of production, distribution, and reception. This volume explores an overlooked yet prevalent element in some of the best-known Gialli, an obsession with art and artists in creative production, with a a particular focus on painting. The author explores the appearance and significance of art objects across the masterworks of such filmmakers as Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, Sergio Martino, Umberto Lenzi, Michele Salvi, Mario Bava, and his son Lamberto Bava. Yeah, so this is actually going into, of all things, paintings that are actually presented in films and what the meaning can amplify from that, which is really interesting. It's something. It's not what I expected. It's one of those things where I might buy. I've bought 2 of her books right now, and I'm already like confused what the fuck I picked up. But it's definitely not interesting. Now, in all fairness, I know that it probably seems right now like, do you know what the hell you're talking about, Julian? And in all fairness, not really. Like, given how 2 of these books that I've bought, especially from Alexandra Helen Nicholas, are talking about topics that I really like, and I haven't really read up on what the book's about, you know. I don't really mind, though, because at the same time, I buy a lot of books that are almost coffee table pieces. Like, I've got a whole selection of books. One of them that is here, that's basically a coffee table book, which I guess I'll show that off last. It's about the Universal Monsters. And I'm not a huge reader. I love buying books that are filled with essays about films. Like, I've got a bunch of film books in my room that are either screenplays or books about writing screenplays or just books about cinema. I think it's like Andre Bazin or whatever. I've got a bunch of his ones as well, which is just essays. And it's because I like exploring elements of cinema that isn't always picked up on in the generic senses. You know, we're all talking about mise en scène, or we're talking about the director or the actors or the production, or what does this scene mean, or is this Marvel film better than that one? But at what point are you going to stop and look at a giallo film and be like, hey, that's an interesting painting, let's talk about that? So the fact that, again, you can make a 300-page book about paintings in a giallo cinema and what they mean. And now, of course, maybe that just straight up sentence of, and what they mean and what they represent, might be a bit vague, might be a bit, well, that's not exactly all of it, but at the same time, that's what I'm grabbing from it. But at the same time, I don't mind that, because in my mind, connecting giallo cinema, or something that's usually very colourful, whether it's Technicolor palettes or the fact that the blood and gore is always usually such a hugely practical effect with a lot of paint and a lot of different works put into it. It's like, I can see that. I can see the connection between that and artwork in particular. So, you know, I'm opening up my mind to more stuff. And of course, even the horror book about women in horror cinema, it has interviews, it talks about all these different women. Sure, I could look this shit up on Wikipedia, but when the fuck am I going to do that? Now I have a book that actually talks to me about all these different people, so I could read through the whole thing, and when a particular name pops up, I might be like, hey, shit, this woman was actually in this film, and she started her career here, ended her career there, and her biggest hits were these ones, kind of deal. Anyway, now for a biography. I bought this one called Stuntman. It has a dust jacket, which I despise. I don't like dust jackets very much, which is ironic, because I also don't like touching books that are going to leave fingerprints, which those past 3 definitely do, from the 2 that are glossy covered, so definitely leave fingerprints, to the one that's not even glossy covered, like a matte cover, and still leaves fingerprints. This is probably why I like hardbacks more, you know, because, yeah, this one I did start reading, didn't get amazingly far into it because I picked up the one on Christine, and I used to read these ones early in the morning at work, but I get driven to work basically every day now, so I don't catch the bus, so I don't get there an hour early, which is fine. But I still got 30, 40 pages in. And yeah, again, this is just your classic biography talking about in this case, American stuntman, Hal Needham, and how, he went from, living in a farm, poor as shit, to working into the city, to just working in stunts, and how that made his career. Now, of course, I haven't read through the whole entire thing, and some would argue that this book's a bit braggy, like, we get it, you really like to overindulge about your life. It's like, look, at the same time, for a guy who risks his life for his job, that's him, So, yeah. it's fun stuff as an overall. I don't have too much else to talk about when it comes to this book, because again, it's your pretty stock standard kind of book. Again, hate the dust jacket, but I bought it from Amazon. But of course, it does include. It's a bit more highly produced, I'd say, with creamy colored pages, my personal favorite color. When it comes to that, whilst also having like textured image pages. It's the kind of classic style book that's not like where the other three, I'd argue, are more, oh, we can print these cheaply from Amazon kind of deal. No real criticism there, because at the same time, to get such high publications isn't always an easy feat, and it's the cheapest thing that you can do of making a book is to do color white paper, basic text and layout, and sure, it is what it is. But it's just what happens. Everyone has different styles of how they do their books. This one in particular is hardback and has a dust jacket, two things that combine well when you pose on your shelf, but I still hate dust jackets, which of course is why I take it off. It's interesting, the guy's amusing to read, and it's one of those things of like, oh, it's like a larger-than-life kind of person, which most biographies should be about. I don't want to read about Rudy Giuliani. I'd prefer to read about a guy who's actually risking something and not being a cop-out, so, Next up we have one which is interesting. I picked this up from Minotaur recently, and of all the covers, it's a bizarre one to choose, I feel. This is Dan O'Bannon's Guide to Screenplay Structure. Dan O'Bannon being the guy who wrote Alien, Total Recall, Return of the Living Dead, even directed that one. I only just picked this up the other day from Minotaur, so I haven't even had the chance to look into it, but this one's more of a analytical thing, talking about screenplay structure and just all that kind of jazz. Like, it's the basic stuff that you'd expect, whilst being less of a... I don't even know, it's got so many chapters to it. It's got a bunch of forward, a preface, and introduction, my god. Talking about formulas and structures, how other people do their systems of writing, dynamic conflict, dynamic structure, character structure, structural analysis, and that's like doing exercises like looking at Casablanca, Citizen Kane, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. There's a lot of analysis, which is interesting. Do it for yourself. Script analysis, script typography, on pace, exposition and twists, why 3 acts, length of a screenplay, inspiration versus rules, perspective, what is a producer, so it actually goes into like the making of films, screen credits, why be a screenwriter, and fear, and then a conclusion and an afterword. So, and also talking about, of course, Dan O'Bannon's filmography, which... Dan O'Bannon filmography, wow. Darkstar, I've got that on Blu-ray. That's the John Carpenter film. He did the screenplay for it, which is basically like a demo of Alien. And then when you watch Return of the Living Dead, it's like, oh, it's basically Alien, but with zombies instead. In a way, there's a lot of familiarities. He worked on Star Wars, Alien, Dead and Buried. Oh yeah, that's the screenplay. Yeah, I've got that one as well. Heavy Metal, I haven't watched that one yet. Blue Thunder, both the movie and the TV series. Return of the Living Dead, which he did screenplay and was the director. Life Force, which he did the screenplay. I really like Life Force. I know a lot of people think it's dumb shit, but I really like it. Invaders from Mars, I haven't seen that one yet. Create a character for Aliens. Total Recall, screen story. Obviously, it credits the other writers and the directors and stuff. But he also did the screenplay. Alien Free, character creation. The Resurrected, aka Scatterbrain. Screamers, Bleeders, Alien Resurrection, Delivering Milo. Alien vs. Predator, Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Wow. Well, I mean, look, he did create the characters for Alien. But yeah, so... given he's written some of my favorite films, from horror to action. Last but not least, we have the Universal Monsters Studio: A Legacy in Horror. This is the anniversary edition for the 90th anniversary of The Mummy, Wolfman, Frankenstein, and Dracula. Revised and updated with a dust jacket. This one obviously is more of, like I was mentioning earlier, the whole... let me take off the dust jacket, which is nicely expansive and yellow. This is the kind of coffee table thing. I leave it here in the theatre room. I haven't yet found place on my shelf because my shelf isn't hugely designed for big books like this. But this covers a lot of the Universal lineup of movies, from monsters to characters to all kinds of stuff. Even stuff that you wouldn't think of. You've got spotlights on different actors. You've got really nicely coloured in pages. Great texture, great everything. Like, this is the proper, like, the big budget kind of thing you expect a book like this to be. I haven't delved too much into it yet. You know me, I'm really busy these days. But for me, that book in particular comes down to me having a huge respect and love of the Universal monsters, and like all of the Universal monsters. Obviously, we have our favourites, but at the same time, I find it really fun to have just like a catalogued history. I know I could just have the box set and have all the documentaries in the box set and all that kind of stuff, but it's still really nice to have it written down, to show all the poster art and stuff like that. And, you know, I just love the Universal monsters, so it's always good. It's good stuff. I have a few books on the Universal monsters, on horror history as a whole, because as you can tell, most of these books are about horror films, because I really like horror. So, but I like collecting the big art books that they've been making, say for like Blade Runner 2049, the most recent one for Dune. I've got stuff for like Alien. I got big ass books for Alien Covenant as well. The Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong. I don't know if they made a Godzilla 2014 one. I think they probably did. I just don't have it. But still, I like buying those kind of stuff. They're the kind of, again, coffee table kind of books. They're big, thick, heavy, chunky. If someone breaks into your house, you could probably defend yourself from a knife with them and knock someone out because they're that heavy. So, yeah, because I like reading about movies, despite the fact that I don't always read about movies. It's one of those things of like, give me a Sunday afternoon by myself where I'm like, I'm not going to watch a movie, I'm going to read a book. You know, maybe I really liked Daughter of Dracula, and I'm like, I want to read about Daughter of Dracula and not go on Wikipedia, so I'm going to jump on my big-ass book, and it says, this is what happened with Daughter of Dracula. Even if it's a really small insert, it's still nice to have that kind of information. So yeah, and of course I have it in my room, I have it in the house I live in, so I can always read it whenever I need to. And that's the benefit of a lot of these books. It may take me a long time to bloody well get around to reading them, and yes, there's a lot of them. Like, I don't even know when I'll get around to the Download Bannon one, because when the fuck do I plan to put in the time to write a screenplay? Like, I've always loved writing screenplays. I've just loved writing fiction in general. And I've written quite a good handful of screenplays in my time, mostly from like podcasts and stuff, other productions I used to do in high school and whatever. So, and short films and the like. But yeah, it's just cool. It's like buying a screenplay. Like, it's fun to just read them to kind of get an idea of how the hell this film is formatted in paper versus screen. So yeah, and of course, talking about people, the making of films, specific instances of films that you probably wouldn't put together as in, like, just as a casual viewer. So yeah, so mad props of course to all these writers, and yeah, go check out these books if I was able to sell you on them. I don't know, but still, you don't have to. I just wanted to talk about them for fun. So, and just because I like to develop having a collection of film books as much of films, because they're all art to some degree, they're all literature to some degree, so yeah, if it makes me look smarter, that's good enough. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video to some degree. I'm not great at reviewing books personally. It doesn't help when I haven't read them or don't know what they're about, but a lot of these are blind buys, mostly because I like the author, or I like what the book's about, or I like the general idea. Like, I like the Stuntman one because I'm like, well, I like stunt films, you know? Like, that's why Death Proof is like my favorite Tarantino, because I just love that whole type of style of cinema. I mean, hell, why do you think I watch most of the Mission Impossible films? Because they're batshit insane with the kind of stunts that they do. So, yeah. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. If you have a film book you'd suggest, whether it be film essay or a history of or a biography, then let me know. I might check it out. Might. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Adios.